Let's talk about the number one mistake that people make when they're drinking water. Now, check this out. These are some interesting stats. The average amount of liquid consumed by Americans, if we average men and women, okay, and this is based on cups, but for my friends in Europe, including Dennis, 1 cup equals 236 grams, okay? All right, an average person consumes 4.3 cups of just plain water. Yet they drink a lot more fluids, but only a little more than 4 cups of water. That is definitely on the extreme low side. All right, now the other things they drink, okay, that's included in all these liquids, soft drinks, okay, 1.7 cups, coffee, 1.5 cups, alcohol, 1.1 cup, tea, a little less than 1 cup, 0.9, 0.8 cups diet soda, milk is a half of a cup, and then juice is slightly less than a half of a cup, 0.4. So as you can see, an average person consumes a lot of liquid, but not a lot of water. Now let's take a look a little bit deeper what happens when you consume things that are caffeinated, like the soft drink, like the coffee, some teas, diet sodas possibly. Caffeine acts like a diuretic. So anything that's a diuretic is going to create more dehydration. It's going to get rid of fluid. Anything with glucose, whether you're sweetening your alcoholic beverage, your coffee, of course, the soft drinks and the juice also is a powerful diuretic, as well as that glucose tends to lock up fluids as you drink them. This is why people that drink a lot of sweets are retaining a lot of fluid, because this glucose is stored as glycogen with a good amount of water. So for every molecule of glucose, you store roughly about 3 molecules of water, locking this water up, making it unavailable to you. So anything with glucose, anything with sugar really is dehydrating to your tissues. Now, what about alcohol? Well, what happens after a night of drinking? You wake up, you're completely dehydrated, you're very thirsty, your brain actually hurts because of the dehydration. So alcohol has a very potent diuretic effect. So the big mistake is that thinking that you are hydrated because you're drinking a lot of fluids. And this big push to get everyone to drink more without really fixing the reason why they might be dehydrated in the first place is another big mistake. Because if you're like the average American consuming over 60% of your calories being carbohydrate in the form of refined carbohydrates, you're worsening your hydration. You're creating more dehydration. Now, will it help? Maybe it'll help a little bit, but it doesn't fix the underlying problem. I mean, this is the big problem that I have with medicine, is that even if you bring up the word cure, right? They basically interpret cure as being, quackery, non-scientific. When you think about it, well, cure is just resolving a problem. Why can't we just cure something? Medicine has become more about managing the problem, managing the symptoms. But as far as curing someone, you're crossing the line. So this does relate to this whole topic of dehydration, because if you really want to be hydrated, you have to look at all the different pictures. It's not just about drinking more water. Let's just take, for example, your sodium levels, okay? Sodium is needed to create hydration. So are other electrolytes like potassium and magnesium. And to be able to have sodium hold fluid correctly, you also need a balance of potassium. You need this twice as much potassium as you have sodium. And so the amount of sodium is not nearly as important as these ratios. So it is important to have a good amount of potassium and a good amount of sodium, but the ratios should be like 2 to 1. And so if we take this idea that just drink when you're thirsty, that can be confusing too, as it relates to this mineral sodium. So let's say, for example, you're a diabetic, right? And you're thirsty. Well, the problem with diabetics is they're usually excessively thirsty and they're peeing a lot. They're trying to compensate for the loss of fluid that goes through your body, because the more glucose they have in their blood, the more they're going to pee. And so if you're diabetic and you keep drinking all this water, you may neutralize the problem, but you're not going to ever correct anything, because the actual root cause of the problem is never corrected. And that is just they're consuming too many carbs. Now, what about in the situation where you're not thirsty, okay, but you're craving salt? Well, you really want to understand what causes a salt craving. It could be your adrenals are burnt out, okay? The worse off your adrenals are, the more salt you're going to crave. It could be you just worked out and you sweat a lot and you lost a lot of salt. Or it could be it's hot out, or you have a condition where you sweat a lot even if you don't exercise and you lose all the sodium. Or let's say you're on a medication that you're taking diuretics, right? And that's pulling all the salt out and you're craving salt. It's also pulling potassium out too. Or let's say you consume a lot of potassium in electrolyte powder, but you don't have enough salt. That can create an imbalance too. Or let's say you're fasting and you're not consuming anything and you're drinking all this water, for example, yet you're not taking enough salt. With that, your body might then crave salt. Even if you do keto, for example, the ketogenic diet, you tend to lose a lot of fluid, and with that, you can lose your electrolytes, including potassium. The more water you drink, the more salt you should crave, because drinking just a lot of plain water will deplete your electrolytes to a certain degree. And so these people that are forcing themselves to drink like a gallon of water a day without any salt develop a condition called hyponatremia. That is a condition where you have a deficiency of sodium in your blood, and that's very, very dangerous. And so if we combine drinking a lot of this water with exercise, okay, and not taking in the sodium, a person can be very, very, very dehydrated, because what hydrates someone is not just water. It's the balance of these electrolytes that go in the cell that help you retain the fluid in the correct amount. So to really correct the problem of dehydration, yes, you need to drink a good amount of fluids, but you also need a good amount of sea salt and other electrolytes. And I would say for the average person that does exercise to some degree should be consuming between 2 to 3 liters, that's 8 to 12 cups on average of actual water, not these other things like coffee and tea and alcohol and things like that. And I would especially recommend that if someone is prone to kidney stones, if they're on the ketogenic diet, just by making sure that your urine is not super saturated, you can prevent kidney stones, even if you're prone to kidney stones. But with that fluid, okay, to be hydrated, you want to add the sea salts, maybe some other electrolytes. Maybe in the water, you add some lemon, apple cider vinegar. But this way, you'll have both the volume of fluid you need as well as the hydration you need. Because, for example, if you're drinking too much water or not enough salt, you end up with a deficiency of volume of fluid in your blood. And that can create headaches, that can create fatigue, that can create low blood pressure, that can create a situation where you stand up and you feel dizzy. So these are just some additional points I want to bring up relating to the topic of water. And if you haven't seen this important video on water, which got millions of views, you might want to check this one out next.